Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Lynn and today I'm going to make a set of notebooks. One will be more of a notebook and the other is more of a small notepad, I guess. So I'm working with the Paper Sweeties second quarter kit. I think it's called the Craft Along kit this quarter. And part of the kit, there was a 12 by 12 paper pad from Photoplay, and we got beautiful papers for spring/Easter. I'm trying to make this notebook more of a general springtime, so I won't be using the more Easter themed papers, but very beautiful, colorful paper pad. So I'm working here on the back cover piece. So I've cut this to 6 3/4 by 9. And I lined the pattern paper with heavyweight cardstock. So I'm using 120-pound paper for both of my covers, the front cover and the back cover. The paper itself is actually a pretty decent thickness. I say paper because it's called a paper pad, but really I would class it more like a lightweight cardstock. And I think just doubling it up with a little bit of this heavyweight cardstock is great for the covers of a notebook, which, you know, I don't expect somebody to keep this forever and ever, but I do think that it helps to make the covers feel a little bit more substantial, and overall it makes the notebook feel a little bit more sort of professionally, finished. And for my pages, these are going to be super easy. I just took copy paper and I cut it in half. So it's blank pages. They aren't lined papers, which I think I'm fine with. For these, I did want some divider tabs though. So I cut these at 6.5 by 8.5, and I'm going to use my We Are Memory Keepers tab punch board to create my tabs. I do have a slower, more detailed video on my channel for how to use the tab punch board in general and how to position or center your tabs. If you are curious to check that out, I'll link to it in the upper right hand corner. Basically what I do, I don't measure when I go to place this middle tab here. I'm just using another tab that I've punched out as a template, and I basically just line that up where on the punch board, and I find that that gives me a close enough approximation for placement, and then I don't really have to measure anything out and deal with all of that. I don't think anyone really cares or minds whether it's exactly centered or not, but I do want to give this as a set or as a gift. And so to make the tabs more functional, I like the pattern paper, especially since it's double-sided. So when you flip it or, look at it from the back, you'll still have a really pretty pattern to appreciate. And so, but with all of that pattern and design, the tabs themselves, I think, are not as usable, because especially if you want to actually label them. So what I'm doing here is cutting out some extra tab pieces in coordinating solid color cardstock, and I'm just cutting them off at the bottom of the tab here, and I'll glue that onto my my pages, the pattern paper. That way the tabs actually are solid, and for papers, the solid color cardstock where I'm using a textured finish paper, I'm actually putting the smooth side outwards so that it's easier to write on it. And one thing that I did, which maybe thinking in retrospect might be confusing for whoever gets this, but as I was matching up which solid color should go onto each of these tabs, my thinking was that I wanted 3 different colors. That way, if you're flipping through and and let's say you don't actually want to label the tabs yourself by writing something on there, you could always just flip through by color. But I realized that the middle, this divider I'm working on here, it's the only one where I put the same color on the front and the back. The other two tabs, the topmost and the bottommost, I actually flipped the colors on the tab because that's what coordinated best with the pattern on that side. But now I'm wondering if that's going to be confusing because if from the front you wanted to access, the green tab, when you look at that from the back, it's not the green tab anymore, it's the pink tab. And I think I could have avoided that if I had thought about it, but I didn't really think about it in advance. I was just looking at the front and then I was looking at the back, and I didn't think about maintaining that sort of color continuity. But the binding for this notebook is going to be super, super duper easy. I am just going to use my We Are Memory Keepers cinch to do some wire loop binding on this. And I cut down some copy paper just to do a trial run, to do a template. And it's a really good thing I did too, because I have that bit of painter's tape, the blue tape, to mark the center of the cinch. And for some reason, when I lined this up, it didn't look centered. And the reason was because I was actually lining the center of my page that I wanted to bind with the wrong edge of the painter's tape, because I didn't actually give myself an arrow like I normally do as to which side is actually center. And here's where I realized it. And so I had to lift that up, put it down again, and then drew myself an arrow so that I actually know what side of the painter's tape to line up my project to. So once I got that all sorted out, and this is the reason to do a bit of a little test run before you actually punch your project. And I've used my cinch a lot of times now and feel very comfortable with it. But and I thought initially, because you may have noticed that I did put my cover piece in, thinking that I'm just going to dive in. I've used this so many times, I don't need to make a template. But I'm glad that I took the time to do a test run. But once you have that first pass punched out, then there is a locking mechanism on the left-hand side that allows you to continue your holes. And that way, if you have larger projects, you can punch as many holes as you need. If you do need a more in-depth tutorial on how to use this, if you head on over to my channel, I have an entire playlist of projects where I've used various We Are Memory Keepers products, including the cinch. So I think the best tutorial I have is probably the one where I do the binding for my coloring books. That would have been around Christmas time, because they were Christmas presents for my nieces. But here I did make a mistake. So I've loaded everything in, and in the order that I want to see it in the notebook. So I've got all the pages in, and as it turned out, the number of pages I was planning on putting in would have been, I think, thicker than the 1/2-inch diameter binding coil that I have. So then I had to unload everything and count out my pages again to reduce the number of pages in each section. I think it turned out to be maybe 15 pages per section, and I had 4 sections in total. So this is going to be 16 sheets of paper. So double that in terms of number of pages. So it's a nice size notebook. But this is my mistake here. because I was thrown for a little bit of a loop when the number of pages wouldn't fit, I forgot to actually flip my back cover to the front before I did the final binding, in order to actually hide the seam where the loops are closed together. And so I didn't get quite as nice of a finish as I normally like to have on my my loop binding, because that seam now, instead of being hidden behind, oh sorry, this is going so far out of focus, but instead of being hidden behind the inside on the back cover, it's actually visible from the outside. So I'll show you what I mean when I go to bind this one. I actually did it correctly. So this is the matching, like the mini notepad, and these pages are 3.5 wide by 4.25 high, and the cover is going to be the exact same width, but slightly taller, so 4.5 tall instead of 4.25. And because it's such a small little notebook, I thought that it would be easier, and I think it looks nicer to be the same width for this style of notebook, because I'm going to actually bind it from the top. And so I'm just again doing the same thing where I'm doubling up on the thickness of my cover pieces. So these are the pattern papers that I'm using, and I'm actually preparing enough for 2 sets of notebooks, but you'll only see me bind one on camera here. And I will do the same thing where I'm going to back these with some 120-pound cover weight cardstock, just to give it a little bit more strength and durability. I don't think you need to use a lightweight chipboard, but definitely if you have it, that would work really well also. I just like using the 120-pound cardstock because it's white, so it's still like a really nice, clean finish. And 120-pound cover weight is fairly sturdy. It's probably not as thick as a lightweight chipboard, but it's close. It's getting there. Combined with the pattern paper, I think that's going to give plenty of kind of stability and strength or durability to these covers. And I am going to round the corners on these too, but just on the opposite end of the binding, just like I did for the notebooks. And again, I'm using the same papers from the same Photoplay paper pad. And I will try to leave links to everything that I used in the description box below. So if you are curious to check out any of these products, then you can definitely check that out. But I love all of the really bright, fun patterns in this paper pad, and in particular, I really like the stripe pattern, and so I used that I think on all 3 notebooks, the 2 small ones and on the larger one too. So now that I've gone ahead and rounded my corners, I'll use the cinch to punch the holes for this. And again, I'm just going to, this one's a lot easier to punch because it's not very wide. It's only 3.5 inches wide, so you only need to punch the one time, but you definitely want to pull out any pegs that come close to the edge, so that you don't get like a partial hole punch. So that's why one of the pegs on the cinch there, it's actually a little bit forward, pulled out from all the rest. And if you watch as I punch, you'll see that that peg does not move like the rest do, because that hole punch isn't actually going to punch through. And this notepad also is just from blank papers, just from my printer paper as well. So nothing fancy there. And I've just printed or punched through, I can't remember offhand now how many pages, but probably definitely no more than what the notebook was, but probably less. I think it's probably closer to 50 pages. But the cinch makes it super easy to punch through several layers at once. And I think I probably could punch through more than I did of the copyweight paper, but it's just easier to on my hands and arms to just print it or to punch just a small stack at a time. And here you can see that I've got my pages all stacked, and this is small enough that I don't actually need the little the stand to actually hold this, but I showed it very briefly, but here's the front cover, and I've just put the back cover, flipped it right on top of my front cover, and then I cinched it. And so now that seam is hidden inside the notebook, so you can't see it from the outside. This is how I normally do my binding, and it's just a nicer finish overall. So definitely I would highly recommend doing that as opposed to what I did on my first notebook. I hope that you enjoyed this project, and if you did, please consider liking, commenting, and sharing. And if you want to catch new videos as I post them, consider subscribing to my channel and ringing the notification bell. Thanks so much. Until next time, happy crafting and have a fantastic day. Bye.